Long ago, it was stated that there are three kinds of lies. There are lies, there are damn lies, and then there's statistics.
And finally, we have Lael Brainard, our National Economic Advisor to the President.
National Economic Advisor to the President and former Vice Chair of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve.
Well, thanks, Corinne, and it's good to see everybody today. It is a good day for American workers and families. We saw more than 250,000 new jobs created in the month of September.
Remember, there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. Neither the August 2024 nor September 2024 statistics have been revised. These are current statistics and not revised statistics, so these statistics may or may not be accurate. Recall that on November 21st, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics stated from April 2023 through March of 2024, there were 818,000 fewer job gains than first believed. That is a huge number revision. Hey, Dr. Brainard, the Bureau of Labor Statistics new jobs report on Friday, November 1st of 2024 said the change in total non-farm payroll employment for August was revised down by 81,000 jobs from 159,000 to only 78,000 jobs. The change for September was revised down also by 31,000 jobs from 254,000 to 223,000. With these revisions, employment in August and September combined is 112,000 jobs lower than previously reported. When you gave us the report about September jobs, you tried to sell the public on something you knew may or may not be true at the time in early September.
All we know are the facts, ma'am. Now, why don't you give us a straight story? It's going to save time and trouble for everybody concerned here.
We saw unemployment back down to 4.1%.
Dr. Brainard, you are correct in stating that unemployment in September is down to 4.1%. But what you didn't say was 2 months earlier, the unemployment rate was 4.3%. What you also didn't explain is the unemployment rate in July was 4.3%, and even though it's 4.1%, and you're telling us unemployment has gone down, in reality, since the beginning of 2023, the unemployment rate was 3.4%. So as you can see, unemployment goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down, it goes up. It stays on a plateau. It goes up, it goes up, it goes down, and you're telling us that unemployment went down to 4.1%. The data you're giving us isn't quite explained over the long haul when it comes to unemployment. Unemployment in January of 2023 was 3.4%, and today it's 4.1%. That means unemployment from January of 2023 until September 2024 rose over 20%. So don't tell us unemployment has fallen.
At a time when inflation is back down to pre-pandemic levels.
All we know are the facts, ma'am. Now, why don't you give us a straight story? It's going to save time and trouble for everybody concerned here.
When you say inflation is back down to pre-pandemic levels, you mean back to the Trump administration. First off, Dr. Brainard, inflation is not down. You must mean that the inflation rate is down, which is different than inflation being down. As you can see from the graph of the Consumer Price Index, the percentage change from a year ago, that the inflation rate is still climbing, but it's climbing at a decreasing rate. For instance, even though from June 2022, when inflation was running at 9%, the inflation rate is dropping, which means that inflation is climbing at a decreasing rate. It doesn't mean inflation is going down. It just means inflation is going up, but it's going up at a decreasing rate. So that when you say that inflation is back to pre pre-pandemic levels, you mean that the inflation rate is back to pre-pandemic levels. So let's see when the inflation rate was last at 2.4%. Well, as you can tell, the inflation rate was at 2.4% somewhere between February and March of 2021. But if you're telling us that inflation, which you meant that inflation rate, is back down to the pre-pandemic levels, you are really looking at when the Trump administration's inflation rate in October of 2018 was 2.4%. So comparing the inflation figures from the Trump administration from January of 2017 to pre-pandemic, the inflation rate remained relatively constant. And then the pandemic recession occurred, which lasted 2 months. And as you can tell by this graph, the inflation rate under the Trump administration was far, far better than the inflation rate under the Biden-Harris administration.
No president's had the run we've had in terms of creating jobs and bringing down inflation. It was 9% when I came to office.
All we know are the facts. Now, why don't you give us a straight story? It's going to save time and trouble for everybody concerned here.
President Biden, you state that inflation was 9% when you came into office. You better look at the data again. Looking at the graph here of the Consumer Price Index from the year before, inflation reached its peak at close to 9% in June of 2022. President Biden, as a friendly reminder, you were elected in 2020 and came into office in January of 2021. So the inflation rate was only 1.39%. And you're telling the American public that when you came into office, Trump handed you an inflation rate of nearly 9%. If the numbers are correct, you came into office with an inflation rate of about 1.4%. President Trump did not hand you an inflation rate of 9%. That inflation rate was created under the Biden-Harris administration, not handed to you from the Trump administration back in January of 2021.
I think that we are now in a part of the recovery where inflation is back down, and that's really what is going to determine whether interest rates continue to fall. And market interest rates have remained low. Mortgage rates have come all the way down close to 6%.
Notice since you last spoke, 30-year fixed mortgage rates have gone from 6% up to 6.7% in just 1 month.
All we know are the facts. Now, why don't you give us a straight story? It's going to save time and trouble for everybody concerned here.
That'll take a couple of questions. Go ahead, Sally.
Thank you so much for being here. Would you say at this point that the U.S. has achieved a soft landing? And if not, at what point will we be there?
Yeah, I would say that, look, we have seen unemployment, the lowest average unemployment rate of any administration in 50 years.
Dr. Brainard, so you want to look at statistics now more broadly on a longer range when it comes to unemployment, rather than looking at the unemployment rate going down from 4.3% in July to 4.1% in September. But when you say that you want to look at unemployment more broadly, you're talking about the long run statistics. Dr. Brainard, I must tell you, I believe that you're really trying to cherry pick these numbers by using the word average. Here's what you stated. Yes, we have seen the lowest average unemployment rate in 50 years. So you're talking about the average unemployment rate. If you notice the green line, that's the long run rate of unemployment, which has been coming down since the end of the 1970s. Obviously, all of the other presidents' average unemployment rate was going to be higher than the administration that you're advising on economic policy. But when you compare the average unemployment rate of the Trump administration and compare that with the average unemployment rate of the Biden-Harris administration, leaving out the pandemic year of 2020, both administrations' average unemployment rate are very comparable.
All we know are the facts. Now, why don't you give us a straight story? It's going to save time and trouble for everybody concerned here.
If I can ask about an otherwise strong jobs report, you still had manufacturing employment dip by 7,000. What do you think is happening in the manufacturing sector right now? Is this a response to higher rates, or are you seeing something else going on?
And I think the right way to think about this, because we have so much new investment dollars from the Investing in America agenda, the right way to think about it is to look at construction and manufacturing jobs together. And there, what we've seen is continued growth. That construction workforce is hard at work with factory construction that is multiples of the previous administrations. That construction of factories is going to turn into the manufacturing jobs of the future. So we see that investment in today's economy, whether it be in chip manufacturing or clean energy, that's going to result in tomorrow's manufacturing jobs.
And just to follow up on the consumer confidence numbers, I mean, there was, upward revision in August, but now it's down in September. I'm just sort of wondering if you can comment on that.
Yeah, so I think the most recent Michigan sentiment numbers actually are showing strength.
Here is the University of Michigan's Consumer Sentiment Report. If you notice, 100 is near ideal. And during the Trump administration, up until the pandemic, the consumer sentiment was near ideal at 100. Since the pandemic, though, the consumer sentiment has been much lower and trended lower during the 2022, and even today is only at 70.1.
For Americans who are concerned about the rate that they may pay on their mortgage or their car that they might buy, what do you see that doing to the path of interest rates going forward?
We anticipate, because inflation is back down, that will continue to show through to market rates.
A month after you spoke, market interest rates went up 50 basis points or a half a percentage point. And look at the mortgage interest rates on home loans during the Biden-Harris administration compared to the Trump administration.
All we know are the facts. Now, why don't you give us a straight story? It's going to save time and trouble for everybody concerned here.
Growth has actually been revised up. It's been above 3% over the last year. And we're continuing to see very resilient consumers. So yes, that's exactly the kind of Goldilocks results that you would want to see.
The Goldilocks principle in economics comes from the children's story Goldilocks and the Three Bears, that refers to an ideal state of an economic system that is not too cold or not too hot, but just right. It's characterized by moderate growth. The economy is growing steadily without large expansions or contractions, low inflation rate, and full employment, where the economy has low unemployment. Dr. Brainard, I think you did a good job of describing that the economy is actually doing fairly well today. But it seemed like during the press briefing, you were more or less campaigning for the Biden-Harris administration moving up to November 5th elections. We're going to end this video with economic data that Dr. Brainard didn't have time to present during her press briefing that may enlighten you on some challenges that might occur in economics as the economy moves forward into 2025. She didn't share with you the new vehicle prices and the used auto and truck prices during the Biden-Harris administration compared to those prices during the Trump administration. She didn't talk to you about the difference between 30-year fixed mortgage rates during the Trump administration compared to the 30-year fixed mortgage rates during the Biden administration. She didn't talk to you about the prices of homes using the house price index for the United States comparing the Trump and the Biden-Harris administration. She didn't talk to you about the difference in lumber and wood product prices using the producer price index for commodities, and she didn't compare those prices between the Trump administration and the Biden-Harris administration. She didn't talk about premiums for property and casualty insurance and premiums for homeowners insurance, comparing the Trump administration and the Biden-Harris administration. She didn't talk to you about commercial bank interest rates on credit cards between the Trump administration and the Biden-Harris administration, when interest rates reached a high in May of 2019 of 17% with the Trump administration. During the Biden-Harris administration, credit card interest rates went above 23%. She didn't talk to you about the average electricity per kilowatt hour in the US cities, comparing the Trump administration and the Biden-Harris administration. During most of the Trump administration, electricity per kilowatt hour was under 14 cents per kilowatt hour. And during the Biden-Harris administration, electricity per kilowatt hour has risen to nearly 18 cents per kilowatt hour. This is a cost index for supermarkets and other grocery stores, their cost of supplying groceries to customers. She didn't talk about the cost of supplying groceries to customers was rather low during the Trump administration and then began to rise drastically under the Biden-Harris administration. If it was the economy that people voted on, then looking at the data, the economy is close to ideal. It should have been a victory for Harris, but instead Trump won. Well, why? Well, my normative feeling is that it wasn't just the economy, it was the people's pocketbooks and how far a dollar went during the Trump administration compared to the Biden-Harris administration. This is a normative statement, but I think that really what happened is people felt that their standard of living was being diminished by the inflation that was caused by both accommodative monetary and fiscal policy simultaneously. But again, those are just my normative thoughts. The Wall Street Journal today on November 7th, 2024, stated that voters who depend on wages and salaries felt differently. What this economy needs is economic growth with low inflation that raises incomes, especially for American households who don't have stocks or own a home. Moving forward to 2025, we don't want an economy like the old adage says that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. We want an economy where the rich get richer and the middle class and the poor also get richer. Hope this gives you a better idea about the U.S. economy and the economic data that's available through the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis with Fred Graffs. Can't thank them enough for supplying these to the world.